Recently, we've been discussing important issues like, can women actually succeed in technology? Can they code? Well, instead of turning to pseudoscience and vague ideas of what a meritocracy is, let's turn to some actual coders. There was research done on GitHub, which is a massive collective of programmers and coders working together in an open source community together to see, so one group of researchers went to see if women were discriminated against in coding. The researchers found that code written by women was approved at a higher rate, 78.6%, than code written by men. This is when they were doing certain things called pull requests, which is when you work with different coders, perhaps you know them, perhaps you don't, to collaborate on a project. So when the woman coders were not identified as being gendered, they generally had their requests pulled more. And when they were identified as women, a little bit less.
So let's start to break this down. I love this because this is real. It's not an experiment. It was based on actual pull requests on GitHub. And it is an enormous amount of data because there was 3 million pull requests. So this is people actually taking action on something they deeply care about, a project that they're working on. So they want results. So we know based on this overwhelming data in this particular example here, when they look back at it, and remember, they didn't look, it was not an experiment, they looked back at it to see what human beings actually did. So when they see that it's a woman, they accept the code a little less.
They request that code less.
Yeah, so the women write the code, they say, okay, a little less, but it's not a huge number. It's not a huge difference, but a little less. But when they don't know that it's a woman, it's gender neutral. But in fact, then you could look at to see men and women. Women do, as Kim explained, about 4 points better, 78.6 to 74.6. So I think that has a number of ramifications. Obviously, James Damore, who worked at Google, recently came out with a memo saying that women are not necessarily biologically equipped to work in the tech field in the same way that men are. And one of the issues that I had with that when we discussed it on the show yesterday was he would make these huge generalizations and he would at best have one study to back it up. And I said, wait a minute. I think it's an interesting conversation and we should have that conversation. And in fact, this leads to a further conversation on that matter in a way that's somewhat uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you can't make generalizations based on just one data point. And if you're good at tech, you should probably know that. And to be fair, this is only one look as well. I would want this study to no end. But at least there was 3 million pull requests here, so it's pretty significant.
Right, and even the student researchers who looked into this were shocked at the results because they were actually expecting the opposite outcome, right? And so it is an amazing bit of research looking into the biases that we might all have, right? Because I don't think that their peers looked at the coding and thought, oh, I just don't want it if it's a woman. I don't think that it's something that they explicitly say out loud. I think it's an internal bias that they're maybe unaware of. And I think that it also has a lot to do with social conditioning, right? The way that mass media portrays women in STEM jobs and how this idea that they're not equipped is perpetuated over and over again. And so I like this study, but at the same time, I think that the conversation is important. And my biggest issue with the story involving that Google engineer was, I agree with you, he generalized. There were issues with what he had written, but the way Google handled it, I think, unfortunately stopped the conversation. It squashed the conversation when we should have a real conversation about it.
I think there are some legal repercussions, or ways they handle this, because if he had done it on social media, for instance, they'd have to probably let him have his freedom of speech, but this was done in an enclosed employee, was it a forum?
Yeah, it's like an internal forum type thing.
And when we're looking at that, it is up to them to govern this as they see fit. He isn't really protected in any way. And I was reading about different peer reviews for getting raises and promotions within Google, and knowing that that is there as a bias is kind of creating an unfair work environment, or at least a hostile work environment?
So to that point, Susan Wojcicki just wrote an article about this in Fortune, and she's the CEO of YouTube, obviously a big part of Google, and it's actually out of her garage or her house that they started Google. She's one of the first employees there, so obviously incredibly successful in the tech field. And she said, look, I've had these biases directed at me endlessly throughout my whole career. That's fine, I made it anyway, right? But it's not fine because I have to protect all the people who now will have to face the same stereotypes, the same biases. So now are they going to think that women are neurotic and hence don't belong in tech? And then is it fair to say then they feel it's a hostile work environment when when they face those stereotypes based purely on their gender and not on their individuality, right? And even if that's not what Damore intended, that is certainly a lot of what people got out of this. And she made a similar point that I did in the video yesterday, which is, she said, look, if you put anybody else and said, well, blacks have lower ability to code, or people who are gay have lower ability, or Hispanic, well, of course it would be unacceptable, right? And so just because you're saying it's women doesn't make it any more acceptable. And look,
I think that women who are working at Google right now, or women who are working in coding jobs or in Silicon Valley who are experiencing this type of sexism firsthand, I know how difficult it is. And look, the onus is not on you. I definitely understand that. But I love the women who are fighting back, and they're not being intimidated by these ridiculous generalizations and the insults that are being thrown their way. Like, keep fighting, and the reason why I say that is because, like, let's keep it real. Even this work environment has changed considerably in the last 10 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was definitely not happy when I wasn't on the first hour, when I didn't get to cover the political news, and I fought for that, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because every woman in every industry experiences the same shit. And my argument is, don't let these guys who like to make generalizations about you and who like to judge you discourage you from doing what you want to do. You know what I'm saying? Because another part of this that I think I'm frustrated by is, I think people who are commenting on it are overly victimizing the women in these work environments, acting as if like we're all weak and we can't handle a little bit of criticism, and that gets under my skin too.
But it's not a matter of handling criticism, Anna. It's about prejudging them. And so, and look, you bring that up. I don't agree with you, and so it had nothing to do with whether you were capable to be in the first hour, and only on the Young Turks would you have this conversation in public, out in the open. John had been practicing to do the first hour and had done it over and over again. That's why he got a shot at it. So we disagree on that, and that's okay. And it doesn't matter, because at the end we have plenty of women who are represented on air, etc. But by the way, I always admit to this, which is that, look, when we first started hiring here, I hired a lot of people that I knew, and I knew more guys. And so that is exactly what's wrong. It was not bad intent. But so the reason that you fight for diversity is because people do hire people they know. And if they're only hiring from a certain subset, whether it's whites or depending on the situation, it might be a different religion or gender, etc. That's why you have these conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable so that we can get to a better place. Now, back to GitHub. Look, this study is not the end all be all too, because it is already looking at women who are coders. And so there's the issue of self-selection here. So I understand that. That's why I said in the studies related that Damore quoted, and this one, you've got to study it a hell of a lot better than that before you start making generalizations about men or women. And then finally, so according to this data, and if you just took, hey, who's the better coders? Meritocracy, right? Right wing always says meritocracy. Of course, we believe in meritocracy too. We believe that you should just judge people based on their individual success. And hence, based on these results, if you said, hey, meritocracy, just hire women because they're better coders. It's the data shows they're better coders, right? Well, that would be stupid, because first of all, it's a 4-point difference. And if you have a random guy and a random woman who are applying for the job, that 4-point difference does not apply to those two individuals. They're individuals. So give everyone the same shot, give them equality of opportunity. Don't judge them based on stereotypes and then judge them as individuals. So we're not looking for women or minorities, et cetera, to have some sort of advantage. What we're saying is historically they've been at a disadvantage, and partly because of the stereotypes. So let's just level the playing field so they have equality of opportunity. And now that we know men are not as good at coders as women, men should have equality of opportunity too. Don't discriminate against men just because they're not good coders. Help us build independent media together. tytnetwork.com/join.